worst case scenario situation is that we aren't fulfilled by our jobs,
Mm.
or we're not working in places that we love.
Mm.
But it's going to be more and more valuable just to have a job at all.
Mm. Mm.
So what happens to our heart? What happens to our
Mm.
purpose? What happens to our well-being when that's a potential circumstance that we find ourselves in?
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know, it's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy, it's comedy, it's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey friends, it's Erin here, and I'm here with a new interview with Cecily Sommers, who is a keynote speaker and a futurist. And we have done now over 300 episodes. We've never talked to a futurist. And in fact, when I was in the corporate world, I don't think I'd ever heard that word. But in the speaking realm, there are futurists, and Cecily is one of the most wise, calming humans I've ever met. And so we talk about this concept of predicting the future, both from, a traditional strategic planning and how to think about that differently and not the bull crap that I know we did when I was there and the PowerPoints and the 3-year plans, but how to think about that differently. But also what I didn't expect is how much of what she talks about, how much it would help me understand and calm sort of the chaos I feel inside for what's going on, quite frankly, in the political environment and in the world environment. And so she'll talk about things like how to, understand that everything goes in a universal cycle. I mean, what I likened it to is fashion, like what goes around comes around. And it's a little bit of the past predicts the future, but in a cyclical way. And found it so fascinating to talk about. And we'll talk about also the 4 forces that are basically driving everything that's happening. And she really breaks that down so that you can start to take them in pieces and make sense of what's going on. And then most importantly, form some insights on what's going to happen in the future. And there's just so much also from a mindset shift perspective. So she'll talk about things that I think will make you come out of this conversation thinking about the future and some of your fears around it in a way that you hadn't before. I know I did. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation I had with Cecily Sommers.
So we're going to talk about futurists, and I'm really excited for our audience because I have to be honest, I was in the corporate workplace for a long time. I worked in strategy roles. I was a CEO. I never heard the term futurist. So
Yeah.
tell us what that is in general, and then I know you sort of help organizations in a slightly different way. Tell us about that too.
Yeah. So a futurist is someone who studies change. That's how I hold it. And it's also my practice. So I study change kind of in its universal patterns. I look to history, I look to biology, I look to human nature, look to physics, look to the kind of cosmic phenomena and find the organizing patterns and forces that we can count on. Because change is change is change. So turns out that there are certain patterns and forces that when we study them, they tell us a little bit about what's happening right now, because change does work in a predictable way, or as I say, but the outcomes are not. So we get to watch it. Another one of my phrases is that the future is not figure outable, it is only followable. And so for me, my work as a futurist has been 2 things. One, as a consultant and advisor, I do foresight-informed strategy, taking a look at the long term and kind of what's the context by which the problems or opportunities we're wanting to go after, so that we can really be smart about how do we take what we're about as an organization and meet the needs of our customers in a future that looks like this. So in essence, that's what it is. And so it's, for me, it's strategy, innovation, and also leadership development.
So I am fascinated by this, and I'm going to go through the lens in which I know best. And I know a lot of our listeners actually are in the healthcare space like I was.
Mm.
And there is, I'm sure, a number of factors. But then there's also this, we're living in this moment where everybody feels like with the political nature, especially in the United States, that seems to be a little bit more irrational than in the past. And, something like healthcare is very dependent on that, right? If you change rules like they're planning to do for Medicare or Medicaid or ACA subsidies. And so if I'm listening to this and I'm in strategic planning, just let's take healthcare as an example. What are some of the things that you look at that maybe within the corporations, they might be very like, if the political landscape is this happens. And what do you look at in that kind of case? And then how do you handle sort of the irrational factors too?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer it by frustrating you first.
Get in line.
Which is
Get in
that-
line. Get in line.
Because, one of the functions of a futurist is to really be able to first zoom all the way out to understand the patterns of change before we then kind of take a look at what are its implications for a particular industry, for instance. So overall, let's take a look at the pattern of change historically and where we are right now. And this relates to that all of living systems function in cycles. And we kind of know this by every day comes and goes. Our breath comes and goes. The seasons come and go. And
Fashion comes and goes.
Yeah, everything works through cycles. And the primary cycle is one that is, there are times of order. It decays and goes into disorder before it finds a new shape in reorder, right? Life, death, and rebirth. So we can see this again across every living system from all the way out into the universe. Big Bang, that was a whole lot of energy coming together and busting apart. Those energies are a part of what change always includes, by the way. So we need to understand that these physics of change are present in every place we look. So, things come together and they get more dense. And as they do, they're also repelling until there's finally combustion. And then we reorganize into a new shape or life form. We all know this happens in our personal lives too. It happens everywhere. So that's why, it's so critical in my work to always hew to the things that are universal. So if we go back to what does the cycle mean for us about where we are today, then we can also, I've done a lot of study of this in history, is that every 80 to 100 years, the system that's been in charge, what we think is the way things should be and has been stable, starts to fall apart. And the world reorders itself again. And it's almost always riding along new technological waves, new shifts in resources, shifts in demography, and then it erupts because it's affecting our economy. And as a means of, as the technology grows, our government and governance shifts too. And then sadly, we frequently go to war to reshape the global order. And we happen to be right on time for this change of eras. So 80 to 100 years since 2 world wars, in which in the following, boy, was that like complete destruction. And from the rubble rose this new order in which we had, for the first time, international alliances and kind of a rules-based order where there was a lot of agreement. And as long as you agreed, it worked. There was a Cold War. We first got it by actually having those tensions.
Mm.
And then what happens is when the tensions relax, more things rise and start to percolate and kind of get into the mix again. Just like, when we clamp down, with autocratic rule in some places, we take it off or the Soviet Union busts up, we get ethnic conflicts again. So unfortunately, this is the energetics of change.
Mm.
And so we do better when we actually can study this in our own midst.
Mm.
We can't really change it, but we can observe, respect, and actually work with it. So it so happens that right now we are in kind of an unraveling. And I'll say it another way too, is that as we go through cycles of change and we create order, there's a container. Oh, life works like this. It feels like this. There's an identity. This is the American era, for instance, in this case. And what happens is that there's always change is always an action. So it's not static. Some things are expiring while other things are emerging until finally there's a balance where more things are expiring because they no longer hold where we're headed.
Mm.
That's exactly where we are right now. And so we are in also the combustible part where we can't see how it's going to turn out.
Mm.
So today, my work is so much more about how do we read these signals of what's expiring and emerging in real time.
Mm.
That it's happening, and there's no surprise. We don't really have planning horizons right now.
Mm.
And what we really want to be able to do is to be what I refer to as being change literate, where we can read change and its signals. The foremost pattern being things occur in cycles, and all cycles give you clues about what's expiring and what's emerging. So become intimate with that, by the way, in your own life,
Mm.
in your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
in your project cycles, in the phases of development in your organization. It's always true in your garden, and of course, we're talking about a global society. We're also talking about, climate change. Like wherever you go, this is the balance of life, which is dynamic and always follows this pattern. So that's the first part of what I refer to as change literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that when we understand that, there are a couple of things that happen. It's like, oh, this makes sense.
Mm.
I recognize that it's true. And it gives me something to clue into. And, when we link these cycles together in the course of a lifetime, whether it's an organizational lifetime and most critically in our own, what we see is a spiral. This is the shape of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that we kind of things fall apart, we're also integrating and including and expanding into something new that we can't yet see.
Mm.
So when we understand this, we can grow a little less freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that the effect that it seems to me is that, anxiety goes down and your agency goes up.
Mm-hmm. So important.
Or as one person said to me after a talk, is like, you deliver the worst news in a way that just makes me feel good. And so there's a place to stand in this, and it's called inside. Stability is not in the environment. Our job now is to create an inner stability. And being change literate is a really critical aspect of how we find our center. Change is changing. Let's watch it. Let's participate. Let's not bemoan it. Try to control it. Get it to stop because it's got more power than any of us. This is the pattern of life. So our job, more or less, is, and then I will pause, I promise.
No, it's okay. This is
It
fascinating.
is to recognize what's expiring and let go of it sooner,
Mm,
right? To
mm,
understand it's giving us clues about what's happening. It's not personal. And it sometimes isn't up to us except to be stewards of the fact that some things are passing. Be thoughtful about letting it go while you're really cluing into, okay, what's emerging? We can't see it. We don't know what it's going to look like. But what we do know is that there is a sense of possibility here. How does our organizational purpose intersect with these new potentials? And because planning horizons, frankly, hardly exist anymore, the speed of these changes is truly accelerating. I find the new mode and a method of management for all beings, structurally and interpersonally, is to be in a um, intentional pursuit of continuous reinvention. The environment is reinventing itself really fast. So evolution says stay relevant, right? So our job now is to actually start to align with changes that's changing.
mm,
And that doesn't mean that we're trying to control it and get ahead of it. Although I will say this does give you the clues of where things are headed. But it means let's get experimenting a lot.
mm,
Very short horizons on what we're trying to learn and pay it forward in the next step and the next step and the next step. We need to be, and maybe can only be, directionally right.
mm,
We can't come up. I mean, in my work, I used to do consistently 10-year horizons, from which we would then get to the 5 and 3-year strategic plans. Can't do that anymore. Can't even do 2 years, really. So our horizons are really from trying to get the sense of it becomes more purpose-based. What are we really here to do?
mm,
And if we point our purpose in the direction of what's emerging, let us find our way forward continuously by freeing some of our resources to stay active. And don't try to lock it in for, a specific measurable ROI in terms of revenue. I talk about return on innovation, which is number one, are you moving in the direction of resilience? Long-term changes that we're watching happen, is it, again, directionally right? We don't know the answer. Are you moving in the direction of your customers' needs so that you can be relevant? And are you moving in the direction of some kind of reward, however you choose to catalog or categorize that, which of course always learning means learning or kind of new capabilities that you're developing. Be specific when you choose an experiment and its horizon of 3 months. What do we hope to see by the end of these 3 months? Can we get, by the end of those 3 months, once again, just a kind of a test of, is there enough sense of possibility still here that we go to the next? So that's an overall mentality and approach for all of us.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too.
So first of all, it is so soothing to hear that, and I think you said it well, that as you were talking, as most of us do, I was toggling between the intellectual side of me and the personal side of me. And ironically, the personal side of me, it's very odd, but my 14-year-old son went through his first breakup, or potentially they're back together, but like his first relationship, and in 48 hours, I've seen more growth, more maturity, more insights into his brain and his heart than I have seen in the last 5 years. And I know the kid pretty well. And, of course, some of what my husband and I have talked to him about is these little things, like just because a relationship has a blip, that doesn't mean maybe you are not meant to be together, but 50-some-year-olds have this issue, right? And you can get through it, and this whole concept is cyclical. So first of all, I'm going to have him listen to you. He's a very old soul, even though he's 14, but I think it's just brilliant. The other part of my head goes to, if I'm listening to this, I know my listeners pretty well. And like I said, I spent time in formal strategic planning roles and informal. Many of people listening either are responsible for 1 or 3 year plans, at least for their own, department or organization, if not the enterprise. And if I'm listening to this, I'm like, hell yes. But my organization, I wish we could have Cecily in, but there's still, every year we get the templates and we get the, timeframes and the initiative, right? Like so many organizations. What one small step and statement and thing could I do if I'm like, yeah, but I'm not the grand poobah of all of this? How can I'm nodding my head violently with everything you're saying. What can I do different, tomorrow in this process that my big corporate machine has me stuck in, that would be different, that captures some of the things that you're talking about?
Man, I so appreciate this because, I said I'm going to frustrate you. We're going to go way out.
Yeah.
And you're asking now, like, so we're down on the ground now.
Yep.
And I'm with you on that. So I have a framework called the algebra of strategy, which is brilliant for all business planning. It's actually brilliant for just plain critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that almost everything, well, let me say it this way. Whenever we look to the future and ask a question, the only thing that's responsible is say, I don't know. I have no idea what that looks like. So let's go find out. So your method of let's go find out wants to follow, what are we solving for? And it usually begins with some kind of hunch. We have a sense that there's something here that we need to either be prepared to go really pounce on, or to defend, or something that's a shift. So what is that X? Name your X. Clearly, I would say one of my heartbreaks really is how often in organizations I see that people don't have clear objectives.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Name your X. That's great.
Yeah. So,
and not my son's X, like EX. X in the algebra.
Right.
X in the algebra.
Yes. Yeah. So what's the business problem you're trying to solve? Really? Like the core of it, its essence. Then the factors for solving for that
And that can't just be, I feel like the business problem always is grow earnings, 10% every year. Like it's got to obviously be much more
Yeah. So,
quantitative.
I've done, big projects on the future of healthcare, for instance, also pet ownership and the future of leadership and all these kind of big, juicy things that are hard to get down to
Mm.
size. And I think the algebra strategy helps us cut the tomorrow down to size for today. Um, and you're right. So, for instance, in the Purina case study, there was a very specific goal, which is we want to see 10 million more pets in loving homes in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Our hunch is this was the CMO who said, my hunch is that demographic changes in the US are going to possibly have an influence on people's relationships. There people from different cultures have different relationships to pets. How might that affect our business? And he said, that's my first hunch, but I want you to go investigate whatever else we need to know so that we can get to that growth objective. Right. And so it's very useful to have something that specific.
And I love that it's called a hunch. That's not even my thesis, my theory, my goal. It's like hunch has such a vulnerable feel to it that it's like, I think this, but I'm also self-aware that I might be wrong.
The way I describe a hunch is just this sense of like, there's something happening over here.
Mm.
We need to pay attention.
Mm.
That's what a hunch
I love that.
feels like. Yeah. And then as you work through this formula and start to get to know what you have a hunch about, you will start to formulate a hypothesis.
Okay.
And by the time you actually then go to really work the hypothesis, so your X is actually evolving from a hunch to a hypothesis. And by the end of it, and you've done good work, you go, now we have an idea, a clear idea of what is worth pursuing. So I also referred to that idea as what are you going to make? So we hunch to hypothesis to what are you going to make? Right? Like a strategy, an innovation path, whatever it may be. There's a what now that I pursue, but it's been investigated. And so the formula or the factors in the formula are all the things that don't change. I have a book called Think Like a Futurist, and the subtitle is Know What Changes, What Doesn't, and What's Next. And the truth is that what changes is driven by the things that don't change. And we always want to hook our strategy to the things that don't change, which are human needs. Human needs never change. Their expression does as context shifts. So as people's lives change and how they work and how they live together and whatever's happening culturally or politically, they may express it a little differently, but the core need for security, for belonging, for power, for status, for luxury, whatever, are, being seen. There are many parts around what your brand is really trying to target and be saying, we're the ones. We have a point of view, which is now we're talking about the second thing that doesn't change, which should be your purpose. Okay. Organizational point of view of we exist to meet those needs in a very specific way. So as a healthcare group, we know everybody needs healthcare, but how do we do it?
Well, and that even got me thinking, as soon as you said make it an X and things that don't change, I was in essentially health insurance and health management side of healthcare. And the human need is that people are not going to need to stop going to see a doctor or do things to improve their health, both on the front end and the back end. The insurance mechanism certainly may change and the payment mechanism, but it seems so stupid simple, but just little things like as we plan, that human need, people are going to get sick, people are going to get hurt, people are going to want to get healthier. It's constant. And so if that is the constant, but the government insurance mechanism, other things are changing, like how do we still solve for that? Maybe in a way that doesn't look like the same insurance mechanism, doesn't look like the same payment mechanism, doesn't look like the same financial arrangement and agreement. It's really simple, but I love this concept. So human needs don't change. Purpose is the
Your
second one that
purpose, your
doesn't
point of
change.
view on how you meet those needs, that's your differentiator. That's the thing you should never let go of. That's the thing that you're going to bring into any vision you cast for this future towards your ex. That should be stable, locked, and sacred. Do not mess. You will lose your way if you do. So now the other factor is my model for scanning change is the 4 forces of change, which I'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
But it addresses everything that you were just saying, is that as the environment is changing, we want to see what's driving that contextual shift, so that we're looking 2 to 5 years out, how will we be meeting people's needs in this shifting context? So let's anchor to the needs. Let's anchor to our purpose. Now let's go investigate what's changing. And the 4 forces are structural. They are the things that actually give birth to every trend and current issue that is in our life. We can trace them all the way back to, very first is resources, natural resources. What's changing in land, climate, drought, food, going to, we need new resources, underwater exploration into the cosmos, all of those things. At some level, you'll choose, given your ex, how might we be impacted by shift and what's happening in resource? We then look to technology. Technology is a big force, but this is a very human force. This is how we invent everything that we do. And it really affects our economy and also our lifestyles and ultimately our culture. So right now, technology, of course, is embedded and is going to be increasingly embedded in everything and is driving a lot of the speed of change. But again, we're going to ask, given our ex and given our relationship to how we meet people's needs in 2 years' time, if that's our horizon, how will technology be impacting that particular business issue we're looking at? The third force is demographics. So once again, the needs of the people we serve, our relationship to that, what are the shifts? And as I look into each of these force fields, I'm also looking at what's expiring in resources and what's emerging. Into technology, what's expiring in technology, what's emerging. In demographics, what's expiring and what's emerging. And then the last force field is governance. So these are the 4 forces that shape every society, every group, a family, every team. We are looking at our resources, our tools and technology, who's a part of it that keeps us strong, and what are our rules of cooperation. That's what governance is. So right now, writ large, our governance, because we are having like existential pressures in each of these force fields, climate change, energy shifts, all kinds of things that we are also going to be, because people always fight about resources, are stirring some of the conflicts that come. Technology is also a huge driver. It feels existential as well, right? Demographics. We have, in some places, aging populations. We have lower labor rates. We have all kinds of things. We have immigration. All the issues that we're experiencing right now on the surface are finding their roots right here in these 4 forces. And so governance, which is supposed to give us a container for how we work together to manage these changes, is also changing itself right now. So yes, it's true. What's insurance going to do? Whether we have an ACA Act at all anymore, how is healthcare going to be managed? All of that stuff, the models for it, the regulation, the incentives is really, really tricky. And as that shifts, so we're looking at how are people's lives changing in addition to how is our business being affected by governance. We will, as you were suggesting, probably going to have to play with our business model a bit. We're going to have to find and experiment with new ways of still meeting those needs, even as we're being whiplashed on a daily, weekly basis. And to find those small things that feel like they're lasting a little longer. What's true about technology, for instance, that we can latch to, that regardless of whether this month we can count on, insurance programs still being in place, we know it's wise to keep meeting people with technology. We know it's wise in demographic shifts to keep, finding ways. We're going to be shifting like crazy because the government is like, it is whiplash constantly. Let's start to really focus on the things that we know are true for the long haul while doing our best to adapt to the shifts that come in more short term.
Interesting.
Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me. They get noticed more than me. They have better luck than me. They're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? Like, I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It was my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things.
Can I tell you about one of my hunches, which is sort of meta in this conversation? Because I think it relates to what you're saying, which is that we're the rapid speed of change, that all the forces are sort of on overdrive right now. One of the hunches that I've had is that the structure in which corporations employ people is going to change significantly, that it's going to move more and more to a freelance, flexible, right? Because we have these forces of you've constantly got to be changing people's roles, but then in an employee-employer relationship, that means you need to hire and fire people, which we're seeing, right? Which is ugly and costly and traumatic, and also seeing the forces of so many people just sort of don't like the BS with an employed relationship that seems to lessen a little bit when you're, sort of 1099 and you're not so beholden to the politics or, the corporate compliance exams and whatever it is. I'm just curious. I know you have a whole system and you're not just a mind reader and a predictor, but because it is sort of a hunch that is a little bit meta around this, I'm curious, what do you think about the dynamics of the workforce? Because that's so important, obviously, to our listeners who are many of them in a sort of traditional employment.
For all
Right.
of us. For all of us. So if you are independent, you're also asking yourself, where's where are the economic flows? And because every single
Sure.
industry is affected, there's nothing that's stable. And so I don't know. I actually don't know or foresee anything here. I mean, we are, Amazon gives us a little bit of a clue where they're not hiring any more people.
No any
And
more
they are,
FTEs, like full-time employees.
that's right.
Yeah.
And also because they're really racing ahead to introduce more automation.
Sure.
And so while they are in a different industry and, logistics and supply chain and all that stuff, and they own their own vertical, so they are unusual in that way. And yet it's a right? It's a signal.
Yeah, I've always said that, a lot of these things that seem impossible, all it takes is one big name company that either gives permission or gives, what's the opposite word, really, like, has other companies running scared that if they don't
Yeah.
follow, they won't be able to compete, financially or what have you. So I do think it's important to look at these big movers and shakers because as soon as they, sort of make a decision that way, the dominoes can fall pretty quickly with others.
Well, yeah, they're proving out technology and they're proving out a model that can be adopted. And so I will also say all trends, first of all, they're expressions of energy in my view, right? We see new capabilities rise. And what we see when we see one aspect of it moving and, we're either scared or excited about this potential, we need to make sure that we're looking in the opposite direction too, because they rise together. Everything carries all possibilities. So I say, look both ways before you cross that trend line. And so my answer will include a little bit of yes ands here. I'll go with the piece about the universals are true for each one of our own lives too, of your purpose, what you're designed to do, and how you show up to contribute wherever you go is what you follow. This is the thread that will pull you forward wherever you go. And we are coming out of probably a 30-year period where we have really championed this. It began in the 90s, which were effectively where, we had a big tech boom. We had lots of deregulation. And so, in fact, it made sense for people to be more entrepreneurial. And then we celebrated that entrepreneurial spirit. And we had books like Tom Peters' Brand You and then the celebration of how to build your portfolio career. And if you go into a workplace and it doesn't work for you, just move on out of there. And by the way, when you are in there, we're now going to really value bringing your whole self in. And we're going to make sure, at a time when there were talent wars, that we're giving you lots of perks and it's fun to be here and that culture was a big thing and sustainability and all the things that you care about, our values should match. Well, that's all gone away. It's all gone away. And so I think it's important for all of us who need to be employed and have revenue is to recognize that that's not necessarily the landscape anymore. And so I tend to go to worst case scenarios because I always feel like if I can find myself there, I know I can be well and I can strategize from there. And so a worst case scenario situation is that we aren't fulfilled by our jobs or we're not working in places that we love. But it's going to be more and more valuable just to have a job at all. So what happens to our heart? What happens to our purpose? What happens to our well-being when that's a potential circumstance that we find ourselves in? And I would say that our heart, our purpose, our well-being is something that we are responsible for, no matter what. And not to let the circumstances dictate it. Because just like all the instability that's in the environment, we don't get a say in that anymore, but we get a say in who we are. And so do all the things that stoke your own flourishing and make sure that regardless of the context, you're prepared to show up as who you are authentically. And you may not be rewarded for that in the way you once wished or could even expect of bringing your whole self. Nobody wants that anymore. But you want it. And so you're going to need to become really facile and sensitive to how do I preserve and care for myself, no matter whether it's the best fit or not.
This all comes back to my 14-year-old son and the advice we gave him
Doesn't
when
it,
he was
though?
like falling apart, that, his quote unquote best friend that he couldn't, was no longer to speak to. And I had this conversation about, at the end of the day, you cannot rely on other people for your own happiness. And that's like such an important lesson. And so it's so funny how what you talk about is so, I just bring that up because it just shows how applicable this is, that you can literally slide from, talking about Amazon and the future of employment and, of consumer purchasing, but it also applies to, 14-year-old heartache and growth and mindset and everything in between, including all of us who struggle with, making sure we feel like we have purpose in our work and are valued and all of that. So it's funny. I love how you deliver sort of tough love in such an opposite way than I do. You know me, Cecily. Like, I am like, freaking suck it up, buttercup. Like, it's up to you to choose your own happiness. But we've talked about this before. That's why it's so beautiful that we have speakers like me and we have speakers like you out in the circuit, because we need all of that. We need to hear it softly. We need to hear it loudly. We need to hear it over and over and over again. So with that said, I'm going to scrap like the 12 more questions I had planned to ask you, because this has been fascinating. I have two questions I always close with, but even before that, I do want to ask this back to, let's say somebody's listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, I have such great nuggets. I'm going to sound like a rock star coming back to my leadership team or my, strategic planning partners, my executives. But they want one more, and they're like, ultimately, like, I want to bring in Cecily. I want to start planting the seeds. And I want to do this. And I'm asking this earlier than normal because it's like, sometimes it's superficial, but this is not like, do you have like a starter kit where people can start to practice this? And then ultimately, if they really want to sort of go deeper, they start to work with somebody like you.
I do have, we've talked about the 4 forces and strategy. And I also have something called the 4 habits of mind.
Okay.
That stabilize us, during these times. And those are all things that people can download. And so I do have that available to get you acquainted. I have a few short videos that explain all of this as well, because I appreciate your question about that. I feel like when I speak, it lands, like it makes sense. And yet it's kind of sophisticated, and it's not, I'm going to remember this forever. I need to have something to refer to know what it is that made sense and why it made sense.
Bridge that gap.
So I definitely have that. I'm more than happy to give you a link to share where people can walk through all of that. And
we'll put that in the show notes.
So,
2 questions that we always ask. The first is, what's your buck that moment? And buck that moment is, this time where you decided to go against the norm and buck the norm and do something that went against the grain. And it turned out really well.
Well, girl, I think I live in the buck that lane. So this is maybe another conversation, but my whole path, first of all, I've only ever worked for myself. My first career was as a professional dancer, both
Mm.
ballet and contemporary companies. I then became a doctor of chiropractic and studied Chinese medicine and homeopathy, which makes me this fabulous systems thinker that I am and diagnostician. I built a clinic. I bought a clinic. I got into business. I was doing lots of teaching through those years. So each one of those is kind of slightly outside the mainstream. And then lo and behold, I go into brand strategy and declare myself a futurist. I mean, buck that.
Right. Here's my resume.
And
Makes
that's
total
right.
sense.
Yes.
Right.
Dancer, doctor, futurist, like, are you for real? And can we make sense out of this? So I feel like I've always been a little bit on the outside, being a translator for people,
Yeah.
and carving my own path and some against the grain and having to prove it a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
Having
I
to
love
show.
I love too that message that also I hear out of that is go pursue things that don't necessarily strategically make sense, that don't have a 5-year plan behind them, and just trust. I talk about this in my 50% rule book, collect the dots and trust that they'll plot their own slots, is what I sort of say. Years have done that. And that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you to be able to say why you should work with me versus somebody else. So I think for anyone that's, especially listening to this, that's used to the strategic plan, not just in their business, but in their career, like maybe
Well,
you need to rethink how you
what's
think of it.
expiring, what's emerging,
Yep.
what's your purpose?
Yeah.
It happens. So I just want to say that I'm so happy that you caught on to the thing that I think really matters, which is that all of these, let's call them frameworks, this thinking is about following what's universal. So it applies everywhere because life is life, change is change. And it's not different when we apply it to business and into ourselves. It's exactly the same. And so it goes very deep and it's a very beautiful and it's a very stabilizing.
Sure.
When you understand that this is how change is organized. And by the way, we're in the flow constantly. So the other piece that I will say about that is that because of that, in my life, and I hope it to be true for others as well, that I find foresight, this ability to actually read change so that you can lead it, to be a profoundly effective tool for cultivating wisdom. And ultimately, that's why I do this.
I love that. And wisdom is a word I don't think we use enough in the workplace, and we need more. And people want
In
to
a
have.
time of greater intelligence, we need more wisdom. And we can't just claim wisdom. And we don't really know how to train for it. Now, I happen to be teaching a course in wisdom right now.
Sounds like a good place to
Which
start.
is, I have a program called the Lead Like a Futurist program, and it has 6 leadership fluencies. And we begin with reinvention, which we've talked about. And then we ladder up ultimately to wisdom. But in between there, it's reinvention, purpose, foresight, innovation, belonging, and then finally the 6th, wisdom. So we're just completing this course right now. And it's been, now people are going, wow, and seeing the payoff of we've been building the distinctions that are required to really be aware of what change and its patterns are and what it asks for it. We're to be aware of the truth of what humility is and how it works, to actually understand what discernment is and how we function with it, such that we can then be ethical. And that this is a path that goes on forever and ever.
Beautiful. You're amazing. Where can people follow you? We have CecilySommers.com. We'll put
CecilySommers.com. Undergoing a brand refresh right now, so please continue to check back.
Yeah. Amazing. Always.
Yeah.
We're always under brand.
That's right.
When we're in the wisdom market.
Yes. And what I have currently as a separate site is leadlikeafuturist.com. And so those two places, and of course on LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active on socials. And, reach out if you want more information, want to have a conversation. It's my favorite.
Oh, I'm sure people will. This has been so helpful. So last question, kind of a softball one, but important. This is called Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck. What's one final tip for people to make work suck less?
Mm. Whatever's okay, there are two things. One is know that everything that you have to do, even the parts you hate,
Mm.
are developing you.
Mm.
So if you carry that attitude, work will suck less.
Mm. Love that. So good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where you do get a chance to kind of lead with your own thinking, which is almost all the time, pay attention to what people are asking for. But inside of that, engage your curiosity. There's always something in it for you. So use everything. The stuff that feels like it sucks, the stuff that feels like it's stuck, use everything for your growth.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you so much for giving us your wisdom
Thanks.
and
It's
your
so fun.
foresights and your equations and and your therapy.
They're right.
And your therapy.
And I love that you talked about your 14-year-old son. Because again, it's universal. I feel it with him, for him, and that these are the lessons that life sets up for us to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. And we see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.